This week's episode of Podular Modcast is brought to you by Novation and their flagship synthesizer, the Summit. I've been using the Summit a lot to create samples to put into my stereo-triggered sampler from 4MS, as well as just playing keys. It is a lot of fun, it's super easy to use, it's very deep but not at all intimidating, very navigable. It also has been very inspirational for me as far as writing new music. So, if you would like to check this out, please visit the show description and click the link. And once again, thank you to Novation for their support of Podular Modcast. Hello and welcome back to Podular Modcast. My name is Tim Held. This week we have Meg Mulhearn and Kim Ruger, aka Belly Full of Stars, on the show to talk about their new album, Conjunctions, which, if you haven't heard, pause this podcast right now, go listen to it, and then come back. It is a real treat. It's a double cassette, and we're going to get into everything about this album here in this conversation. I've been a fan of both Meg and Kim's music for a while, so I'm really, really happy to present this episode to you this week. So before we get into this chat, I do want to talk about last week's episode. We had Ross from Moth and Zeef on, and if anybody out there knows Ross, you know that he's quite a character, and if anybody's been listening to this show long enough, you know that I am a goofball, and Ross and I both like to be goofs together, and decided that we would do a fully improvised episode about nothing that's real or nothing that has to do with synthesizers. And some people thought it was funny, but a lot of people out there didn't think it was funny or didn't quite understand what we were doing, or was it a joke or not. And I don't think explaining jokes is good for jokes, and I don't know. I didn't really want to talk about it, but just because of some of the feedback that I got, I felt like I did want to address it. I don't want to apologize because I think it's really funny, and if you like dry improv, silly humor, then you should check it out. But it is a show about synthesizers, and people come to the show weekly to get their weekly dose of synth talk and whatnot, and there was no synth talk whatsoever, so it in some ways is a bit of a bait and switch, so if I just don't want anybody to think that I was trying to mess with you or confuse you, or sometimes if you don't get a joke, or if you're not in on the joke, then it feels like the joke is on you, and that was not at all my intention. I would never want to make a joke at my listeners' expense. I really appreciate you all coming and listening to the show every week, so I just wanted to make that clear, that I was just trying to be goofy and have fun with my buddy, and I did, and not everybody enjoyed it very much, but I just want to make it very clear that I'm not trying to, make anybody out there the butt end of a joke. So there we go. I have addressed it, and we're going to move on. So at the end of this week, I'm going to be putting a post on Patreon for my Patreon subscribers to come to, first come, first serve, and get themselves either a module, some patch cables, a cassette, stickers. I'm passing on a bunch of stuff at the end of this week. So if you have yet to sign up for Patreon, go to patreon.com/Podular Modcast and be on the lookout for that post. I think I've got 3 or 4 modules, a bunch of patch cables, stackables, different colors, different shapes, a bunch of stickers, and a bunch of really cool cassettes. So, once again, patreon.com/Podular Modcast. I would like to say thank you to Patchworks for their continued support of Podular Modcast. Please visit them online at patchwerks.com or go visit them. They're in the Fremont neighborhood of Seattle. They have one of the coolest showrooms I've ever been to. They also are doing classes, a bunch of different instructors with a bunch of different types of courses and lessons and whatnot. So head over to patchwerks.com to learn more about that and sign up for their newsletter because they're always doing really cool sales. What else? They've got studio gear. It's not just modular. It's not just synths. They've got everything you need. So if you're just getting started and you need some studio monitors, an interface, and maybe some like MIDI controllers and just getting your basic studio set up, then they have you covered. So once again, patchwerks.com, patchwerks.com. I also want to give a shout out to Waveform Magazine. The latest issue came out and there's a lot of really great feature articles in there. Schlappy Engineering has a full article, Chaos Devices, a bunch of really cool stuff, really good gear reviews, and they even reviewed my friend Steven and I's album Kitty Safari, and Ellison from Waveform wrote up a very lovely review, so I wanted to personally thank him for that here on the show. But if you're not subscribed to Waveform, then you should go to the show description and click that link because it's a fantastic publication. All right, so we're going to get into this chat with Meg and Kim here in a moment, but first I want to talk about some 4MS stuff. This week's episode is brought to you by 4MS, and the patch that you hear playing below me is made up of quite a few 4MS modules. I'm using the new Mini Peg, which is the mini pingable envelope generator. I'm using the new shuffling clock multiplier. I'm also using the envelope VCA and then the shaped dual envelope VCA. I'm using the spherical wavetable navigator, the dual looping delay, and I believe that's it right now for the 4MS modules. But this spherical wavetable navigator is blowing my mind. So I'm basically using it as the primary voice here, or the only voice other than the drums. So I'm using the 6 voices from the spherical wavetable navigator and their corresponding LFOs in a mode where you can use those LFOs to open its respective voice's VCA. I've also got each voice tuned to a different note, so it's actually playing its own little sequence. If I just had it playing on its own, it would be just this repetitive 6-note sequence. But I'm taking it a step further and sending some stepped voltage into each one of the voices, 1 volt per octave ins, as well as sending some of that stepped voltage from the leaves, from Mystic Circuits, into the transpose and the spread inputs. So the transpose obviously is just transposing notes, and then the spread is actually you can kind of think of it as your inversions on your chord. It's just kind of spreading out within the octave range your different notes within this chord or sequence. I've got all of that stepped voltage running into the DPW switch, and then I'm hitting the switch with the shuffling clock multiplier. So you're actually getting, they're all the same sequences. There's only 4 different sequences happening right now, but they are being switched up as far as what voice they're going into or whether or not they're going into the transpose or spread. So getting a really cool generative, evolving but not so much repeating patch sequence-wise. So I'm using the shuffling clock multiplier to send gates to the Weston 8110 drum machine. So that's where our drums are coming from. And I'm running the drums into the Mimeophone and the Aurora. So the Mimeophone's from Make Noise, the Aurora's from Qubit, and then those are running into the Aikido, which is from Bastel Casper. They just sent me this last week, and it's blowing my mind. It's a 4-channel dynamic VCA mixer. So not only do you have your 4 channels with nice faders, mute buttons, and CV ends, you get side chaining capabilities as well. So that's what's giving this kind of breathing thing. I'm side chaining the reverb and delay tails on the drums, and I just absolutely love it. You can set your side chain speed from slow, medium, or fast. And then a really, really cool feature on it is it has this spectral envelope out. So you have 2 envelope outs basically. Not only is it a VCA mixer with some side chaining capabilities, it's also an envelope follower or generator. And you can select what frequency range is actually creating this, what they're calling the spectral envelope. So I have it in the mid-range right now. So you can use your low frequencies, mid, or high frequencies of what's going into this mixer to create an envelope to then go out and control other things. And it is so useful. It's nice and compact, really, user-friendly, nice faders, mute buttons. Yeah, absolutely loving this thing. So you must go check out the Aikido. Thank you again to Bastel for sending this out. It's really finding a comfortable home within my setup. But yeah, let me go back to the spherical wavetable navigator. I'm going to try to build like a big video for this because I think it's extraordinarily deep, but the UI on it is so well designed that it's, you spend 10 minutes with it and the manual, and all of a sudden you're off to the races, and it is a powerhouse. You could use it just in its own little case and not need any other modules. It is a module, but it is also just kind of like a standalone desktop synth almost. Like I said, the UI is great. Not only is it 6 voices, but you get 6 different LFOs, and you can shape those LFOs in all sorts of ways. And I haven't even talked about like the actual wavetable nature of it, which I will get to when I make this video that I'm talking about. It's an ambient dream machine. That's what I keep referring to the Swan as, is the ambient dream machine. So yeah, I feel like I've talked enough about this. It's kind of hard to walk through a patch without a video. So hopefully I'll have a video out by next week, kind of focusing mostly on the Swan, but I'm also going to be using the other 4MS modules that I've talked about during this patch, because they're all just becoming so integral into my system that I really want to share with you how I've been using them all. But yeah, just getting all these new 4MS modules recently, on top of having the Nautilus and Aurora from Qubit and the Aikido now from Bastel Casper, I feel like my kit is well-rounded and full, and I don't really feel myself wanting for any more modules. So that's a really good thing. So once again, thank you to 4MS for sponsoring this episode, and shout out to Bastel Casper for sending me this Aikido. It is amazing. Please go check it out. Link in the show description. Yeah. Welcome to How the Sausage is Made.
That's what I was about to say. I feel like we're giving you a lot of work. What'd you say?
This was kind of taking me back to like the pandemic days where I was talking to people about TRS and TRRS, and I was like, no, well, you have to do this and so forth, and then configure your camera to do this other thing. And I feel like for a while there, for maybe like a month, I was like, kind of everybody's like, go to like tech person, be like, okay, so this is what I want. But I was like, it's just like, people freaking out before a live stream or something like that.
Yeah, totally. And like you're trying to play, God, what we played like this, like was it You Don't Know Jack or some like Jack party pack games where we would get on Discord and we would all like get in with our web, like our microphones, and I was totally new to all of that, and it was just felt like a lot of like texting and talking to people on phones and multiple devices, and yeah. Oh boy.
I've totally done that. Tim and I were talking about how you and I, Meg, went through the starter era of trying to figure out live streams during the pandemic and all that, and how many, I don't think I actually told them about, like Elisa, about how many problems, how many stops and starts and all that sort of thing, but having to just figure out the whole, suddenly you're a TV studio, which, like Tim's like, now he's an expert, TV studio producer here. But man, when we all had to start getting that going, that was such a pain. It was so difficult. There were so many tech gremlins.
Yeah. I feel like one of the few good things that maybe has come out of the pandemic is figuring, this kind of interface out. I feel like, Zoom has gotten a lot better, and Zencaster certainly got a lot better. And I feel like they took a lot of notes from Zoom. And
I remember doing like a Twitch stream, and I don't know where it went. I was
That's right.
streaming somewhere, but
Didn't you
the
didn't you
host of,
say you found out it like was streaming somewhere in France or something like that?
yeah, like I had gotten
Yeah.
somehow the wrong, pass key or whatever. And I don't know, I don't know how that happened.
Were
Um,
people watching? Like random people just like stumbled upon it, or?
I have no idea. I don't know where it went. I don't know what's happening. It was real. I was having a really good time though. And I was in the moment. I was getting this like, my partner was watching it from the other room. He came and he's like, are you gonna wait, are you playing right now? He's like, I'm trying to watch this. I'm like,
Right.
oh no, where am I even streaming? It was a very moment.
Oh, that's funny. Well, welcome to Talking COVID and COVID and technology with me,
Yes.
Kim and Tim.
Mhm.
So I feel like I don't know where to start with all of this. Two guests is always a little difficult because, I want to, and especially if you're both first time guests, and I like to get a little backstory. But I also don't want to eat up too much time of talking about the new record, which I absolutely love. So maybe could we just go around the horn and do like a crash course in your journey into, becoming a musician, and particularly electronic, and your elevator pitch on your backstory, and then maybe we can put a nice little bow around it and talk about how you two started working together. So whoever wants to go first. I guess that's my job. I'm the host. Let's go.
Right.
We'll start up in the upper left. Why don't we start with Kim?
Okay. Geez, I won't go through the full musical journey because it's been a long, long time. Started writing songs, playing piano, singing in choir in high school, and kind of came from that background. At that time, I was also involved in a church scene. And so, kind of coming at things also from that background, singing hymns, singing praise worship, and that sort of thing, which is important because it taught me how to chord and kind of like between the two, the basics of music theory. I went on to go to college and study music composition for a couple of years. And then eventually I went to college for recording engineering at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University.
Oh, wow.
Finished
Cool.
up my degree there. But where I started getting involved in electronic music was the first college, Converse College, where I was. And they had the starts of an electronic music lab there. And it was just basically like one professor's Moog, and then another professor had like an early emulator that was there. We had some Yamaha TX modules. This is late 80s.
Okay.
And so it was very rudimentary, and it was like figuring out how to step enter MIDI on it was beyond DAWs, but it was pre-DAW era, so where everything was just MIDI sequencers at the time. So got into that, got my first synth myself, which was a Yamaha SY55, learned how to do MIDI and kind of program that and the ins and outs of that, and then learned more when I went to MTSU and got involved in the electronic music lab there. So that was years. And then I was kind of just writing and doing things on my own for a long time. I have a piano here at home and playing on the piano and kind of writing on my own stuff. And then jumped to about 2013, and I had a friend who was starting to post things on SoundCloud, and he's like, you should put some of your stuff on there. So I came up with the name Belly Full of Stars. It was a lyric that had just thanks. It was a lyric that had just popped in my head. It's not actually a lyric I used for any of the songs. It was just, so it just is. And started putting things on there and getting on Twitter and just started meeting folk. And from that ballooned into kind of recording things and sharing things with challenges like the Disquiet Hunto.
Oh,
and
shit. I
yeah.
just talked to Mark for the second time the other day. I think his episode will be in the next few weeks, but he was
that's so cool.
He was my 9th guest, and he
Yeah.
was the Junto group was a huge that was kind of like, I want to say, where I really baptized myself in a like experimental electronic, because I was coming from like pop punk, and
Oh
then
yeah.
kind of started getting into more electronic stuff, but then found that a lot of the stuff I found was like dancier, but I knew there was weirder stuff out there, and I don't know
Yeah.
how I found it, but yeah, that is so cool. Wow.
Yeah, and for me, it was through Twitter. It's just, finding Mark on Twitter and then doing it. And I haven't done a challenge very often in the last couple of years, just because of being busy with some other things. But for a while, for a handful of years, I was doing them, at least once a month, I would say,
Yeah.
something like that. So there's a lot of those on the SoundCloud, and
So
that's
cool.
just a wonderful, awesome, and yeah, and everybody's coming from every walk of life,
Mm-hmm.
as musical walk of life, as far as like the gear they're using and everything there.
Mm-hmm.
So that and the Cities in Memory project, if you've heard of that,
That sounds familiar.
that's out of the UK, and they kind of do the same sort of things, where they basically they go ahead and field record in different places or gather field recordings on a subject from people, and then they send out a call to sound artists to remix those in their own ways.
Oh, wow.
And then they have this wonderful sound map up on their site, so you can, every time they release a project, they put on the sound map, you can scroll over and see where the original sound is and hear the original field recording, and then also hear what they call the rework or the remix
What
of
is this?
that.
What is this called again?
Cities and Memory.
Cities and
Yeah.
Memory. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, I have to, sorry
Yes.
to, if I don't look this stuff up, I will,
Oh, totally.
like, I'll forget about it. And yeah,
Yeah,
cool. Thank you.
and I forget Stuart's last name, but Stuart is the guy who is Cities in Memory and puts it all together. And so I was doing some of those, as well, and then that kind of led into a lot of just different things. I think there was a recommendation from Mark about somebody, Seth Chrisman, who was coming into town, and that got me reconnected here to the local experimental music scene. Turns out, and some people that I knew from way back in college, like 15 years before, that I knew that were running it, and so it kind of like all came together that way. And then through the Cities in Memory project, I met Stu Bowditch, who runs the Courier label over in the UK, and he invited me to do what was really kind of like my first release, the EP Broken Data Pool.
Okay.
And also through Twitter, I happened to meet this musician, Paul Masseri, who was involved with putting together an electronic experimental festival for the very first time in Memphis called Memphis Concrete.
Oh, cool.
And I had never played out at live as Belly Full of Stars. I was just recording and that sort of thing. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to play?" And I was like, "Okay, between you and I've never, played out any of this stuff, here." And he's like, "Okay, well, I just won't tell, Robert, who's kind of like Robert Traxler, who's kind of organizing this stuff. Just let me know, like in a month or two, if you actually can do it. We'll put you on the bill." So I went about and I kind of like got my system together and I figured out this like small synth, like a vocal FM based and pedal based kind of setup and that sort of thing. I was like, and rehearsed a little bit. I'm like, okay, I think I can at least make interesting sounds for a while. But that was really kind of how I actually got into improvising, because from my classical background, I remember what piano juries were like, and they were very like stressful, because you're up on the stage and it's hyper focused on something that's going on there. And I was like, I want this to be the opposite of that experience. So I just want to be able to make sounds and have it flow and just be listening to what I'm doing in the moment and have like nothing planned. And that's where kind of the improvisation setup kind of came for, and that's pretty much what I do now. The instruments are different. I've got a modular system here. The modular system is, and semi-modular is all over the collaboration that Meg and I did in very conscious ways. But I also have still play out with the small, kind of like a modified version of the small synth and pedal format that I use, and I add Borderlands Granular on my iPad in there and kind of live sample and sing into that, and that's part of it there too.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's sorry, it's a long journey.
No, I know, to try to, you know, nicely wrap it in a short period of time is very difficult. So you did a great job.
It was
actually
a
thinking
very
that
long
as you were going through, I was like, wow, this is way more succinct than I would have been if I, you know, was asked this question.
Well, fortunately, it was a very long elevator ride that we had there.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We're going up to the, cool. Actually, Meg, before we move on to yours, do you mind if I pause for 1 second? I told Kim before.
I think they're all.
I'm gonna hold on. I just want to hit record in the DAW, and then I'll do a little clap for sync. And we're back. Okay. Well, Kim, was there anything else? I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, that was a lot. So that kind of brought us. I mean, I think the only thing that I didn't cover was really how I met Meg, and we can either talk about that now or we can veer into that.
Let's hear from Meg, just so
Yeah.
people have a nice picture and little story of Meg in their head, so they can.
Sounds great.
I think it'll be better that way. I don't know.
Well, that was a very succinct.
Thank you. It felt very rambly, but thank you.
No, that was great. Whenever I talk about my musical journey, I always feel a little bit. It's. I mean, it's all over the place. You know, I started off playing in school orchestras. I'm a violinist and a pianist, and then I kind of quickly veered off when I was in my probably really early 20s, playing in like punk and like hardcore bands and playing the violin. And
cool.
yeah,
is this like the height of like your like Dropkick Murphy flogging Molly, like yellow card kind of era?
I think it was more like post rock kind of stuff, you know, like heavy like post rock.
Nice.
And so that kind of led me into like playing in like doom and like metal circles, and strings, you know, have a really nice space in those places. And then played with some bands and did a lot of touring and that kind of thing, more like in the metal spaces. But I also had a solo project that I started, which was like a looping project. It was based on like looping my violin, and you know, writing songs about that. And I think there was like a big like looping kind of scene, you know, happening around that time.
What did you use? Did you use like the Electro Harmonics big cat?
No, I didn't.
No.
I used like a Boss RC20 XL. It's like the two.
Is that the double? Yeah, I had that thing. That was great. And you could store samples on it and stuff.
Yeah, I still like, you know, prize my sample bank from that thing, and you know, it's that thing. Those are great. I had two of them going at one point, because I was like, I think I got one off a friend for like, you know, $60 or something, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, you know. So I created so then I was like making beats on the body of the instrument and stuff like that. It was like a really cool kind of course in being your own, you know, one person band. So I did that, and then I kind of shied away from that for a little while, and because I realized I really wanted to kind of get into like more electronic music, more experimental music. Started playing with a friend of mine, Kelly from Make Noise, invited me to an Oak Coast study group, and it was just kind of from there. It was like, oh, this is amazing. I gotta investigate this. I gotta see what's going on with this. And then I've been playing, you know, been really into playing modular, but also playing the violin, and like kind of marrying the two, and having them be friends. And so I feel like they have a good solid friendship going on right now, the violin and the modular. And that
Nice.
was kind of like my aim, because I really don't think that we need to be so separate with, how we make music.
Totally
It's,
agree.
and I think that these modular concepts like really, they really rewired my brain in a really positive way. But it didn't make me stop wanting to play the violin, so.
You're like speaking to my soul right now, because I'm a guitarist. Sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt, but
No.
I'm a guitarist, been playing since I was 12. It's definitely my strongest instrument. And then getting into modular, I kind of hung the guitar on the wall and it stood there, stayed there for a long time. And I finally feel like I got to a point with modular where I'm like, I know how I want to use it. And I've been using guitar through it a lot lately. And actually, I have to show you guys this because I did this morning. This is so nerdy.
Ooh,
Cool.
I love it. Let's get nerdy.
So I just got the field kit from Coma. Have you seen those?
Mhm.
It's
I've
like
heard.
a little, yeah, it's like got like a 4-channel mixer, radios on it, but it came with this like kit, this field recording kit that has all these like piezo mics and motors. It has even like this little thing that can drive like DC motors and stuff. But anyways, I taped the 2 piezos to the guitar bridge and then ran
cool.
those cables to some really, really long stackables. And then this is my geophone, my lone
Yeah.
geophone, which is like a seismic microphone. And
Yeah.
I've got that taped to it. So my plan for today after we're done is to make some weird guitar shit with my new Frankenstein setup here. So
That is so cool.
so yeah,
Cool.
sorry to derail you there, Meg, but you're really speaking to my soul.
Yeah. Well, you've kind of hardwired it in, and it's
Electrical
that's
tape can take
Well,
you long ways.
with that microphone, you're probably going to get like a lot of the like sounds of like what is going on, sonically in like the body of the instrument.
That's the yeah. So the geophone is it's like you put all the it's just low end and it's really 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 sensitive. So I have the 4MS percussion interface and you can mess with the sensitivity of that. So I've got the sensitivity really low. And because these the piezos tend to be pretty the dynamic range is pretty like high mid to high.
Yeah.
Actually just playing it clean, all 3 of them together, it sounds like a pretty nice guitar sound. And I haven't even actually plugged the guitar into anything yet. But I am
Cool.
all right. Sorry, I'm gonna nerd out. I'm gonna show you the setup too.
Yeah.
Please do. Yeah, because that's funny because like it sounds really similar to something I've been doing in like live lately too. Not so much the hardwired thing, but using the
yeah. And I definitely want to get into the string portion and stuff. So I just got this like it's kind of looks
whoa.
Yeah, so it's just like a laptop stand, but I've got my 2 4MS pods and then my Strega and then the field kit. And that's kind of like my current guitar.
That's a chaos machine. That's great.
Totally. Yeah, it's
That's
really
awesome.
fun. And then I got my battery so I can bring it into the wilds and freak people out, which is always really fun.
You just did Tim, you just did a video where you were out in the wild with your guitar. Was this using the same exact setup or is this kind of like a new iteration?
Was I on a ferry or was I on the ferry boat or was I by a troll? The big troll.
Oh, I think you might have been on the ferry because there was water in the background.
Yeah, so that was kind of like a miniature version of this. I think I just had one of the pods and the Strega. I just got the Coma. Like this, I haven't really used it yet. So today is like all right, let's see what we can do with this. But lately it's been the 2 powered pods and the Strega, because with those pods, you only need 1 power supply and then you can daisy chain off of them. And it works with Strega, even though they're not technically the same, but I looked it up and people have successfully done it. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna You're gonna do it. And the Strega is just such a beast for guitar because it's, with the filter and you can have that envelope follower. You can really get some really nice, like crazy tremolo stuff with the filter and controlling the filter with the dynamics of like what you're actually playing and stuff. I just totally hijacked your guys' show.
Well, it's funny because you were talking about the Strega, and that was what was really the emphasis for the waves, the tumultuous waves that are on Plutonic, which is the first track on the record, and you like just really trying to push the filter on that, like as far as would, like almost to the point of like not being okay, but trying to.
The Strega is very good at getting into those zones. Yeah, on all fronts. Yeah,
exactly. So those waves are Strega based waves.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that was and that was definitely so yeah, you can, I don't know, there's something about Kim. We were, to kind of like segue into like talking about the record, we were trying to really, what we did was we started sort of talking about observing cycles and acknowledging cycles. That was kind of like the big, like kind of overlying theme. And so we kept, we were observing them in the natural world. We were observing them in, in just the way that things were developing, and even some like really interesting like timing as far as like how when we would finish like certain sections would be like on a new moon or on a full moon or something like that. We were observing like these cycles, and so we did. I definitely, I think subconsciously at first, but then more consciously was thinking about natural cycles, and thinking about, waves of course are like that's the first thing that I think of when I think about sort of a natural like oscillation like that. And so it makes sense that I think we both have kind of our own interpretation of natural cycles within the record, and it was cool. Kind of like which modules are gonna, and which techniques are going to enable us to like sort of make this be more apparent, or make this sound, or give this feeling of this sort of natural cycle.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Kim. I want to definitely jump in to this. I had just had a few more questions for Kim, just to like round out the narrative, but please finish your thought, unless I just totally jumped in.
I was just going to kind of go on what Meg was talking about, because Meg and I were just talking about actually this very thing. You segued right into what we're doing, and kind of what was going on with the album. And we were talking about different people's reactions that we've heard, friends of ours who have listened, and talking about that, like pushing the envelope on some of the things just to the point of where like it might go over, but it might come back. And one of the neat things that happens is there's a place that a friend of mine was talking about in the song titled Crossings, that I did. And that song, it's a feedback patch that's the no coast and the Strega, a generative feedback patch that I just like, I plugged it in and I just like created the patch and heard the filter kind of going up and down. It was creating effects with the harmonics that was changing the level, either increasing the level, or if it was, getting out of phase, then it was, decreasing the level on things. Then towards the end, it just like really swells up. And my friend was talking about how like she kind of, her phrase was like, I was wondering if the mastering was going to hold or if it was just going to overwhelm. And I knew, that it wasn't, because I had recorded essentially just observing the cycles that those two instruments were doing for like an hour. I recorded it. And then I took kind of like what was the most compelling around 10 minutes. And that's what you hear. So it's like literally just observing the cycles. And then I added that kind of in the morphogene, I live sampled my voice and added that kind of loop to kind of ground the sound a little bit more, kind of, make it maybe feel a little bit more meditative and maybe not quite as aggressive. But the other sounds I didn't. And one of the interesting things that I don't think Meg and I have ever really talked about is that we had similar instruments that we used on it. Like we both love the Strega. So when you started talking about the Strega, I'm like, you're walking right into our territory here completely. But Meg and I did not talk ahead. We talked about process ahead of time. We talked about, like how would the cycles manifest itself perhaps in sounds, like what kind of things might we use or not use. But we didn't say, okay, I'm going to use, the Strega, I'm going to use the no coast, I'm going to use the morphogene, but we ended up having some very, not 100% the same, but extremely similar instruments that we ended up using, in part probably because those were the things that we had kind of compiled beforehand and we're already working with, but in part because I think for both of us, these were the instruments, like, okay, if we want to reach for this idea of a cycle or something like that, these are the instruments that kind of call.
I think the fact that you both, without discussing it with each other, selected similar tools, to me that kind of underscores a thought that I've had about the record, is of how it does sound, like a coherent piece together, even though it's a split. Sometimes splits have like a similar, maybe they're both within the same genre or something like that. But this, like, if you didn't tell me it was a split and I just played it front to back, I think I would just think it was you both on every song. So I think that's pretty cool. And Kim, you mentioned something earlier. I've got to see if I can remember it. Or maybe it was Meg. One of you said earlier, and I think you just like invented your new genre, and I think it perfectly describes the album, is like meditative aggression, like meditatively aggressive. And that's something that I really, because I'm not super well like versed in like the doom stoner side of metal, but I'm getting more into it. I really like Sun, and I'm trying to find more stuff like that, because it's the Cookie Monster vocals always scare me away, but like the really heavy stuff without the singing is I'm very drawn to that. But part of what draws me to kind of like the Sun's later stuff, and it's something that your record does for me as well, is it almost like goes so hard and heavy that it comes back around to where like I could listen to it to like fall asleep to.
Absolutely. Playing that kind of music, it always felt really cathartic to me. It didn't feel depressing or any of these other terms that I think a lot of folks will like kind of say about heavy music. It is meditative, and when you have these like sonic volumes and you have these really long phrases, or like 3 chords to get up inside of, you know what I mean, to like all inside of and sort of see what all of this texture is about. That's a meditative space, that's a flow space. And playing that is, I mean, I think bodily as well, like if you're playing like at these like really like high volumes, you have all of this sound kind of impacting you in a way that's really can be really relaxing, so I think that there's like a body reaction that you have, especially if you're like either seeing it live or you're playing it yourself,
Definitely. Like babies will fall asleep in really loud environments and stuff. And I think this is a thought that just came to me the other day, and I'm sure other people have thought about this, but everybody says the book was better, right? They love a book, they go see the movie, and everybody says, they just can't, they always put it on the director or the people who made the movie. And I've never felt that way, because I feel like with a book, you're also using your creativity while reading it, because you're creating the visuals in your head and you're making these connections. And I feel like the movie does a lot of that for you. And I feel like that's what, kind of this ambient long form, especially like with your record, I feel like what like you said, Meg, like these chords for you to crawl up inside of, like I love that. I feel like that's a great turn of phrase. But because it's so has so much more space in it, you as a listener are also involved in the creative experience like you would be in a book or something. And I think that's what draws me to this kind of music. And I lost where I was going with that. And I was very proud of where I was going with that. I was
No,
like, this
I
is
think
good stuff.
You were going in a good place.
I know.
Yeah.
And then it just stopped, but
No, I think you landed there because I
Yeah.
think that, you know, talking about how you, being kind of charged with that space, you know, to not get, I mean, being able to like sit with whatever kind of feelings you're having, or to allow those things to kind of come up, like whatever it's kind of stirring, you know, that's a courageous thing, rather than move on to the next thing, you know. That I think it is a kind of a courageous, like adventurous listening to like be able to like to do that, and
yeah.
and kind of sit back and be like, all right, I'm gonna ride this out, you know. It's this
I love
stuff,
it.
but you know, ride it out, and then at the end of it, or even in the beginning of it, you start to feel maybe really joyful or maybe really moved in some way.
Yeah, and I think I think from the performative side of this kind of music and from the listening side, there is a good practice could be found within both experiences of making and listening, of being present, you know, in the moment, especially as somebody performing this, because it's moving so slowly and the changes are, you know, gradual and over long spaces of time. I feel like you really have to be aware of where it's going and where you'd like to take it if you do have plans, or how, you know, if something does happen that wasn't planned, like you don't want to overcorrect too quickly. It's kind of like overcorrecting in a car in the snow too quickly, you know, you can get yourself into more trouble if you do that. And yeah, I don't know, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thing, because it goes back to, you know, when I was talking about my history, about conscientiously going into improvising instead of, you know, having things that are pre-planned. And, you know, I may have a sample or two that I know I can reach for, that I know is in a certain key. But what I do with it is very much in the moment. And this is also, you know, in the project too, because like my first original track, so much of actually what's on there, I think there's only one track, and I'm trying to remember which one, Salacia, I think, that I did overdubs on. Then everything else are long form, even longer form. There's a few edits like in Salacia, where I was using Meg and I don't know if it was, we don't have the I'm segueing into something else, sorry. I don't think that it's on the Bandcamp or not, but what happened is that Meg and I created original pieces for the beginning of each one of our parts of the split. So like the first 3 songs on mine and the first 2 on Meg's are our original tracks. And then we exchanged tracks and essentially did reworks of each other's tracks, which is part of what I think, you know, really lends to the cohesion, making it feel like it's almost like one artist going through a journey with
I missed
both
that.
of us.
I thought it was just you two separately. I must not have dove deep
Yeah,
enough
I
into
don't think we've been talking about this. I don't think the description's up on Bandcamp. So most people who don't like know us personally don't know that that was the process.
Okay.
And it was a great part of the process to do that. But most of my takes there are live one takes. They're just being in the moment with the elements. Even when I was reworking Meg's tracks, I put her samples and some of her stems in my modular system. Oh, cool. And had them playing throughout. So everything that I was doing was like an in the moment live mix. And it's just, I creating that way. I mean, I just love it, because you have to be present in the moment. And for me personally, I like to not exactly know where I'm going. I like to not have an idea. Like I said, I know, you know, there are some samples I can reach for if I want to change where the pace of things are going. I know I can reach for things in different sections, but exactly when I'm going to do it, if I'm going to do it, what I'm going to do, where it's going to end up, I never know. And it's all according to what I'm just hearing and feeling in the moment. If I'm performing live, sometimes it's like what else is going on in the room.
Totally.
There's
You're not the first person that's brought that up. And I think that's a
yeah,
really, really interesting um, observation from a performer's uh, perspective, because it seems like when it's one of those things that you hear and you're like, well, yeah, duh. But then you're like, but I also never thought of that until somebody said that, it's when it's like so simple and, and beautiful, but yet like kind of like genius in the same way of like, like being able to be attuned to that, and like, you read the energy of a room, like it's much easier in a rock performance because if everybody's pumping their fists in
right.
time with the kick drum, then you're doing something kind of right. But I feel like in the modes that we operate in, it can be a little more of a difficult read.
I personally, one of my favorite parts of, performing electronic ambient improvisation live or any, kind of improvisation live is the wind down, because like I've played in rooms where like they weren't there for me, they were there for the act that was coming next and that sort of thing. So they didn't know what to expect, or they were restless, and you can kind of hear it and that sort of thing. But when you get to the end and you start kind of like working in it, and you've got that like kind of final fade out, and the room gets quiet, and they're like really listening for like all the last little bits of it, and they're like, everybody's holding their breath to hear that like last little sound. And then it's like, yeah, man, that's just, yeah,
It's like
that's
you
the
safely
thing.
landed together.
I love that. Yeah.
So I do. You answered some of the specifics that I had about the record, because I want to check the time. I want to make sure that we. Oh my gosh, 40 minutes. All right. Um, I want to know how the record came about. Did the label come to you individually and then, hey, I want to work with Meg or I want to work with Kim? Or did you guys think of something to do together and then approach a label? Or I guess, how did you guys meet? Because if you're in Tennessee and Meg, you're in North Carolina, right? How did you all meet and decide to work together? I guess let's start there.
Well, I had put out a record with Fallen Moon Recordings with Nick. It was my first kind of like synth record called Breath is a Wave. And Kim and I sort of just knew each other because we were people making music modular in the South. And we were
Yeah. And I have
just
family in Asheville, so I go back and forth to Asheville quite a bit.
Okay.
And so we met through a couple of years before through mutual friends. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we sort of just knew of each other, and we had already at that point become friends and had talked about trying to do something together. And then actually I think Fallen Moon started this series that's where they will take two artists and put them together, and their idea was Kim and we were like, well, we were going to do that anyway.
Oh, perfect.
Fantastic.
Feels like a lot of those types of things are lining up for this record.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. And Fallen Moon, if you're listening, I would love to be paired with somebody. just put that out there. Well, and they're like a sub imprint of Past Inside Present, right? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So Nick Turner, who plays as Tyresta, is kind of the head of the Fallen Moon records. And it was interesting because Nick knew Meg, and I had known Nick. We had met actually through SoundCloud a couple of years before, even before he started working with Past Inside the Present and stuff, and we struck up a online friendship. But I didn't know I think he approached Meg first and then approached me just like within a day or two. And I didn't know if he knew that we knew each other. And so when he's like, hey, would you like to do this? And I was like, do you know that we're actually friends in real life? I was like coming over to Asheville that next week, like after he asked. So I was like, I'm going to see her next week. We're going to talk about this. This will be great. So it was, an interesting piece of kismet, because, we didn't know that all of the triangle of connections there were all completely connected, I think.
I wonder if Kevin Bacon's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, Yeah. I mean, probably, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it the Six
That's true.
Degrees of Kevin Bacon or something like that?
Mhm.
We could do that, but it might take longer than 20 minutes or
Right.
30.
Yeah.
It might take another 40 minutes to try to
Right.
suss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'll
don't
do
know
some
my bacon
research. I'll see
number.
what I can
Okay.
come up with. Okay. So my second question with the record is how much back and forth. I mean, obviously through this conversation, I can tell that you guys were definitely like communicating with each other and trying to flesh out the idea together. But like, how often, what were those meetings like? Were you finishing tracks and then sharing them, or sharing, like, here's a mix of something that I'm after, will this fit? Or like, what was that like collaborative process like? Because like, it sounds like it was a collaboration, but also split, it's kind of like covering a bunch of different bases.
It was an absolute dream, I mean, it's amazing. We had these really long conversations where we were just talking about like cycles and synthesis and the creative process and our pretty much everything. And we would send back these notes. I have all these like notes on my like notes app about all these observations of cycles we had kind of collected, and then we had all these words that we were using, and we would send back these words, and then we were just really in touch with each other like kind of throughout the process. But we did have some pretty epic phone conversations.
We did.
Where we just kind of discussed everything kind of, and the way that it evolved, and the way that we were sort of just remarking on how everything is cyclical, everything is a cycle. I think that had a lot to do with like, we just got very, we got very, very excited about talking to each other about the next cycle that we observed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, I love that. Having like a, not loose, but like a broad, like something that's very broad. You could hang a lot of things on that. You could look for cycles in just about everything. So once you're like kind of clued into that, you're seeing it everywhere.
And that was definitely something that, and that was part of our conversation, is just realizing, observing the cycles, and that they are everywhere. They are in every part of it. And for the month that we were around the full moon time when I started composing. And so I kind of went from full moon to full moon on doing the first three, the original compositions and that sort of thing. And within there, kind of like kept a journal of like cycles, things that kind of like came into our life that kept repeating and that sort of thing. And then trying to kind of think on those and then compose. But we didn't actually share, while we were sharing a lot about our thoughts and our process and our lives and our emotions and everything that was going on, we didn't share tracks, and we decided not to until we were done with them. So once we had our original tracks completed, then we sent them to each other. And and I mean, we would talk from time to time, so like if we got excited that like, hey, we just had this, I just did this thing on the violin and it was really cool, or if I came up with a loop that I really liked, I kind of like talked a little bit about it. But we didn't actually hear what each other was doing until after our original pieces were complete, essentially, pretty much. I mean, I think there was one or two things that I added just a little bit later, but the root of like most of my pieces were there. And then we exchanged, and then we kind of did the same thing for our reworks too, is that we went about and went into them, and it kind of created them on our own, still talking, still conversing, of course, keeping in touch a lot during that time, and then did the same thing, kind of like debuted them to each other at the same time.
Okay,
it was really
so yeah, go ahead.
That was really, because we could be like, I'd be like, I don't know what is she up to, that thought of being like, I you would describe something and I'd be like, how is she going to interpret that in a sonically, and
Right.
really exciting, especially when we like sent each other our tracks to be like, what? Okay, so this is where you've been.
Exactly.
It's really cool. It was a really cool process because there was a reveal. There were two reveals, really.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I feel like so I love collaborating. Like I love just, working on art with other people, no matter what it is. Like, especially when you trust the person. So like, obviously you both trusted each other to, to keep these until they were finished. But I am like just picturing myself in a situation like this, like especially after the phone calls, the excited phone calls and all this, like, it sounds like it was a really, really nice, like just like creative time. Like it sounds like it was just really flowing. The muse was the muse had you on the ropes. And I feel like that must have felt like Christmas morning or something. And my question where I'm going with this is of course, like it's like how different or similar, like what was like the surprise, like the expectation versus the reality of each other's tracks?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
I think one thing that was really interesting to me is that I feel like in my original tracks that I was more like they're at a slower pace. They're more kind of like the underlying energy, almost kind of like wasn't an illusion that I was thinking of at the time, but it's coming to my mind now. But it's like the lava flowing under the ground. And I feel like Meg's was more like the eruption happening. And I think so hers had so much, when I first heard it, there was like so much energy in what she had done. And we talked about it, like the illusion, like not only sonically, because there's like, I think it was the strega waves, but they literally sounded like waves in parts of her piece. So it literally sounded like a storm that came along on the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and then the waves crashing and all that, and then it comes back down and and settles and that sort of thing. So the flow and the energy of Meg's was what I was, especially since for my compositions I was coming from such a kind of almost like a drone, like a singular drone that changed very slowly in places. So when I heard Meg's energy, I was like, oh my God, there's so much energy in this. This is amazing.
Nice.
And I had a similar kind of feeling as well, Kim, in that I immediately was struck, like when I wrote, Orbital Resonance, which was based on your track. I was like, I would hear bits of things, and when you talk about this, it's funny because like we were talking before about how things were very big and long form, but things are also like very, very, we have songs that are just like made of these little tiny bits, and I mean, that was a lot of, right, microcycles, like little painstaking, I'd heard this one part and just painstaking, like piecing it together to create this like sort of almost a melody, like a choral melody or something like that. And I heard that immediately, even in the long form piece. So it almost felt like there were other pieces hiding within our pieces.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
like
we
just
just
like guiding you. You have to mine it or something.
Yeah, like we just had to kind of like, oh, well, what if I go down this path, or what if I go down this path? And I was like, oh, there you are here, it almost felt like you were sort of like they were sort of hiding in there, and you just had to kind of uncover them.
And it was pretty cool because especially the one that you used for that rework was like one of three, what ended up being three different parts in Ebb and Flow in the first one, but it was actually the first sequence that I had put together for the entire project. And I gave it its own name. It was the cycle of Rust. The theme of Rust kept coming up. So it even had its own name, but I kind of didn't know where to go with it, to expand it. So it became part of one of the three parts of that song. So when you took that part, and then I had to go back, since that was all one live take, I had to go back and kind of like piece out the little pieces and threads and kind of like make stems for Meg that weren't actually exactly the flow of how I did my live mix, because I was doing it all live to two. But what I loved is when Meg did the rework, I was so delighted by that, because I'm like, you made the piece that I couldn't make from that you made the piece that this piece needed to be, that I couldn't finish expressing. And I was just like so over the moon about that. That was just so cool that she picked up on that exact thing, because I was like, yes, it deserves to be its own piece, but I didn't know how to do it, and you did it, and it was awesome.
That's like the best thing about collaboration. Like, I was in bands in high school, and then I went to college, and I was going to be a professor. So I was like, I'm just a musician on the side, but I never really, that's all I ever wanted to do. Anyways, for basically my whole academic career, I was playing on my own, just playing acoustic guitar and singing in the kitchen sad songs. I was a depressed young man. But then, like, I always felt like the music that I'd made by myself was good, but I just always felt like there was something missing. And when I got back together with my best friend from high school, we learned how to do stuff together. And now we're in our late 20s and writing music together again. It was one of those like aha moments. Like, I think I might be slowly becoming an adult. Where like, it is so cool to have someone be able to give you that assist and bring something that you're proud of and really like, but help just push it up to that next level and be like, I never would have thought of this, and it's so much better than it could have been without, I don't know. I love that so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was definitely how I felt listening to that. I was just like, yes.
Well, Meg, I sent you I sent you a message, and then I was like, we've only really chatted online, and we don't really know each other. And I sent you this message, and I was like, I hope she doesn't think I'm a psycho. But I'm actually forgot what it was. I'm going back to look. I think you
like said something like
exploding heads or something.
There were some exploding head emojis, and I was like, what? I love to see that. I love to see explode. I mean, I think any artist likes to see exploding head emojis, like in response to their album. It's generally a good sign, unless you harm someone, which you don't think.
Right.
No, I was just on a walk around the neighborhood, and I felt myself getting like pumped up, and because I've been listening to a lot of heavy music lately, because I want to kind of make something heavier. So like, I've been listening to a lot of like Deerhoof and Lightning Bolt and stuff, and I feel like you even tapped into some of that energy on this. And when I hear that in this kind of music, that I get really pumped up about that. I'm just like, because it's new to me anyways, but it's like, you're not going to find what you guys make like readily on, the new releases on Spotify. Like I feel like you have to search for this kind of stuff. And when you find that version of whatever it is, like if it's ambient or doom, there are ambient fans out there and doom fans out there that would both, like, if they found your record, are both going to be very, very happy about this. So like, when you do find that thing that's like, it's doing the thing that I've kind of been looking for in this kind of music, like, that's just like a really fun, I get pumped up.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah. That was actually a great message to get. Yeah, it was like, I was excited about that.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, holy shit, mind exploding. And then I was like, oh, we don't really know each other. I hope she doesn't think I'm a fucking weirdo. But
I assume you're a weirdo. So
yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I feel like it's no secret that I've put it out there pretty readily that I'm definitely a weirdo. But
I think most people that you talk to on the Podular podcast are weirdos. So
yeah, they're all my favorite types of weirdos. I mean, y'all are real weirdos too. Don't even try to. Yeah. Okay, we are at an hour, but I don't like to end things without asking my guests if they have anything that they would like to scream from the modular mountaintops.
I've heard you say that, and I don't. What do you?
Do you want to know what I mean by that?
Yeah, because I mean, I
want.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So,
no, you go ahead.
I want it to be evocative in the sense of what you want it to mean. So like if there it could be some people promote something, some people give advice, some people just, make a proclamation of any sort. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. Like, what does that question evoke for you? Like, I kind of want it to be open ended and let the weirdos be their weirdo selves.
Ooh, okay, that's tempting.
See, the problem that you have here is that we're both like very deep thinkers. So like we could probably take this phrase and like think on it for like and talk about it for like about an hour. I think that's what
Oh my
both
gosh,
Meg and I are like.
you just gave me a good idea. We should do something like that where you guys could get back. Not you do the knee jerk reaction one now, but if you guys wanted to give me a more in-depth thing, I could stitch, if you wanted to send me an audio recording, I could stitch that in, or you could just write it up and I could read it on a future episode or something. Okay. If you wanted, I don't want to give you extra work, but
no, that sounds kind of great. Fun. I would be thinking about it anyway, so I might as well.
Right. We're probably I'm going to take a stab at a knee-jerk reaction though, which is kind of following on a little bit of what you were talking about, Tim, just a minute ago about this recording being both, hopefully appealing to ambient people and people who also like heavier music and that sort of thing. And Meg has this wonderful phrase that she uses to describe herself, which I love, which is genre agnostic. And so my yelling from the modular mountaintop is make the music you want to make, because I think it's so important to, we were actually talking about this, was it maybe even last night, talking about how people feel pigeonholed in genres, and not just, of course, like for marketing purposes and people who are more in the mainstream and that sort of thing, but even people like doing what we're doing, which I just consider, experimental. Honestly, like I use the phrase Veers ambient because Fine Time, kind of steers that way. But I have definitely been in ambient shows where I'm the most experimental person. I've been at experimental shows where I'm the most ambient person. But I think that that's just so important. This, like, just in general, and you're talking, we're talking about like all being fellow weirdos and that sort of thing. Make the music and I'm going to go to make the sounds you want to make, whatever seems interesting to you, and don't worry about if it falls into a genre or if it matches a label or if it matches even what audience expectations are, because I mean, most of the time you're going to end up playing a show where people are not there for you. They're not expecting what you're about to do, and maybe you win them over and maybe you don't win them over or anything like that. But the biggest thing is to do something that you enjoy, whatever it is. If it's long form, if it's short form, if it's ambient, if it's dance, it's, if it's just music concrete, and if it's harsh noise. I have some friends who are in harsh noise bands, and they just, love the wall of sound that they make and stuff like that. So I would say that, like, basically, I guess you do you, and encourage people to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's come up a few times in some recent episodes, and with different verbiage and stuff. And but the underlying like theme or thesis of all of that is like you're gonna enjoy yourself much more, and like whatever authenticity is to you, or originality or whatever, if that's important to you, like the most original thing you can do is just make what you're compelled to make and follow the sounds that you're compelled to follow. Because if you try to do this type of music, I don't know, it's just, I feel like you're already shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. But yeah, so I totally agree with that.
Yeah, totally.
And to kind of continue, totally, Kim. Yeah, we're very much, I'm very much want to yell that from the modular precipice. But I also think that like whatever you like or whatever you want to put out into the world is maybe what is what needs to be out in the world, right? If you're not fitting in because of like something that you're doing, or maybe your lack of experience with something, or maybe your reticence about the technology, or whatever it is, if you're feeling those kinds of feelings, then maybe that's the kind of attitude that's needed. Maybe whatever you're going to create is going to be really special, and is what needs to happen, and that maybe, so that feeling of like, that feeling of uncertainty, of maybe imposter syndrome, or any other things that you may be feeling, could also be a sign that's what's missing,
Totally. Yeah. Go to the places that scare you, as Pema Chodron would say, like
Exactly.
there's a reason you're scared of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's, like I used to sing in bands. I used to be a songwriter, singer-songwriter. I wanted to be the next Conor Oberst. Again, very sad young man. But I left like the singing songwriting thing behind, because I just got to a point where I was like, the type of lyrics that I hold, like my standard of good lyrics, like I am not capable of doing that. So I haven't, written lyrics, or, I sing for fun because it feels good, but I don't do it in music at all. And there's a part of me that wants to, but I think the main reason I'm not is 100% fear, It's just
Yeah,
fear
totally.
of how it would be. Yeah.
Like I'm not a great, like, I'm not a great, like, classical session musician, and it doesn't speak to me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and but I can do other things with other instruments, and if it's not speaking to you, sometimes you are good at stuff that's not speaking to you.
Yeah.
True.
Right.
Sometimes you can be like, yeah, I can make it. I'm a wizard at Excel or something like that. Don't enjoy it, but
Right. Yeah.
I got some chops, but I think that, I think that, like, kind of leaning into that, but also that, leaning into a place, those places where other folks are not into it yet, maybe, because like things take a while to sort of percolate, and you may be at the bleeding edge of something, and
Totally.
who knows?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you in your heart of hearts are like, this is speaking to me for some reason, as long as it's not harming anyone else. I feel like add that caveat to literally everything.
It's unfortunate that we live in a world where you kind of have to now.
Yeah.
Like, well, just to kind of, like, unless was that your modular mountaintop proclamation, or were you tagging Kim's and then setting up your own?
I think our modular, like many things, I think Kim and I were like sort of we're on the same mountaintop.
We're tag teaming on that.
Yeah.
Tag teaming.
Nice. Well, there was something that you had said earlier that I wanted to kind of like use as a nice little ribbon to tie on this, but it had to do with, taking time with something, multiple listens, and just kind of listening to your description of the reworkings and how you guys, communicated and everything. I want to just stress that, like any good album, multiple listens are going to pay off. I think that is going to be especially so. Especially just for me, as somebody who has been listening to the record, for the past couple days or probably weeks now since I got it. I'm really excited to dive into it now after this conversation, because I know it has more to offer, but now that I have this as the supplemental material, I'm really, really excited to do that. And I want to say thank you both for giving me your time today and coming on, and thank you for the record. Yeah, I love it. I'm really super into what you guys are doing. And finally, can you tell us where to get it and anything else you'd like to point us in the direction of?
Sure.
Well, you get it on the Fallen Moon's Bandcamp.
I got the cassette. It's really cool. It's like a double and like a giant case, and yeah, it's really nice.
It is cool. I've actually haven't seen anything like that before, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I was telling Kim before we were recording that I think it's just the layout, the art, everything, the clear cassettes, just it's very like sleek, and it's just like it's a nice piece of art in itself.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and the art was fun because we collaborated on that as well. I do some digital photography, and so that was an intentional camera movement piece that I did, but I sent several of them to Meg, and I was like, okay, which one feels like it? And
cool.
And so she was instrumental in doing that. And then the inside cover art, Meg took the photograph and then did some editing for hers, color editing and some different things, and created her own piece of art for that. So we're trading on and off all over the place. Including with our videos. We just released some videos.
Yeah, I saw those today. I wanted to get into those too, and then time flew by.
Yeah. And those were, just to speak for a moment, those were a fun collaborative process because we did the same kind of exact things. We shot videos ourselves and then sent each other just a cache of videos that we had shot, and then each one of us picked one of the other songs and put together the video for those songs.
Cool.
From, so like for Meg's song, I picked, Balance Wheel, and took her videos and then compiled that and created the music video for it from her videos. So, and she did the same thing for mine. So it was kind of a neat cross-pollination for our process, creating the entire
I feel like
album.
Your process across across the whole, like everything with art and everything, I feel like that I almost want to use it as a template for a future collaboration. Like I love the spirit of it and how it was like immersively collaborative. It's not just on the songs, but like the whole thing. And I had one more question. Are either of you pacers when you're on the phone?
Yeah,
I am. And my wife and friends, like if I'm on a long phone call, they're just like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I will. So I was gonna say, like, that in itself is a cycle, like the pacing on the phone.
It would be great to like time lapse yourself and like just see what your routes are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because I bet you have some like repetition, but you're not like clocking it, right? Like,
and like maybe there are different routes for like when you're talking to like customer service for your like internet.
If you're irritated versus like, oh my god.
Yeah, whether you're
talking attention to stuff like that. Like we were like, why do I do this? Oh, I do this. Huh? What's going on here? It really was like a really self-reflective like tool. Not just like. So we were paying attention to kind of observing our own cycles, and so, I mean, it might be interesting, like just set up like a little like camera to be like, all right, well, I'm gonna see what my pace like over the course of something like that.
That's so funny.
It's an interesting way to like find out, things about yourself too, is by trying to observe, not interrupt, but observe your own cycles.
Yeah, I didn't even know I did that until. I had a few people be like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, just sit down." I'm like, "What are you?" Oh, apparently I cannot. Like, I'll just get super fidgety and.
See, I can't do that because there's always a cat on me at any given point. If I would disturb the whole ecosystem of cats if I actually got up. So.
Yeah, I don't think any cat that was living with me would be able to do that because I would be too busy pacing. Like I have camping chairs, but when we are standing around the fire, people, if somebody's sitting in my chair, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sitting in your chair." Like, no, really, like I'm not going to use it. Like I'm pacing.
Just
I'm
be pacing.
Constantly like I don't know how I do this show for as long as I do actually, but do you guys have time for the Patreon bonus section where I just ask you a couple rando questions just for the Patreon subscribers to get a little bonus content?
I do.
Sure.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. So you have to go. It only takes a few minutes. So something one of you said earlier was, we were talking about reading the room and, playing live shows. And I don't remember what you said, but it made me think of like, we've all had people come up and say, great set, or, people tell us really nice things. But I once had a person come up to me after I played a set and was like, forgot exactly how they worded it, but they're like, so like people like that kind of music, or so people like what you were doing. Like it was just like he was truly flabbergasted by the audacity that I had to do whatever it is that I was doing.
Wow.
So I'm curious, is there anything like funny? It doesn't have to be negative, but like has there been any, like, is there any memorable thing that somebody has said to you after a performance that was just kind of like took you aback or something?
It's sad that my mind leaps to this because, and you'll understand why here in a minute. I had a live show. I was opening up for the awesome Susan Alcorn in a small venue, and I was doing like planned a kind of a 45-minute long ambient set beforehand. And at about minute, I'd say 38 or something like that, I was standing during the performance. I started to feel faint. And I was like, okay, shifted my weight, to see if I like actually was gonna, if it was just like I was locked my legs or something like that. Nope, still happening. And then it finally occurred to me, like, I'm about to faint here. So here's what I'm going to do. There's a chair right over there. I can see a chair across from me. I'm going to try and do my fade out, like we were just talking about, like how the long fade out is the thing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a fade out, and then I'll have hopefully just a moment to, like acknowledge the audience and then just go sit down real quick. I did not make it. I fainted. I fainted standing up at the end of the set. I made the fade, which was amazing. And I think I kind of remember.
That's a pro move.
Yes. And it was funny because my husband said afterwards, he's like, I could tell something was going on because your fade was a little shorter than it usually is. But I did. I made the fade and I passed out standing. So I was unconscious and leaning against my table of gear. And I, of course, didn't know that this was the case. And at one point, and so the room apparently, and I was recording from the other side of the room, so I heard the reaction afterwards, so everybody applauded, thinking something was normal, and I was just standing there. And then I kind of leaned a little extra, and I'll tell you that was somebody's reaction to that. And then somebody realized, like, it's wrong, and my friends came rushing up and helped me sit down on the ground and that sort of thing. And that entire time I was unconscious. And the two comments that I had after, one from an artist, Janelle Leppin, that was traveling with Susan at the time, who I had just met that night, is she was so wonderful because afterwards she said, I honestly thought that was part of the performance piece. Nice. So she thought that my leaning against the table before she realized that everything was wrong, she was just like, oh, this is just part of, like her presence or something like that. And then there was somebody else, and I don't know who they were, that afterwards, after I recovered and I came back out, came up to me afterwards and said, quite honestly, like, I think you were just so mellow that you knocked yourself out. Like, your music is just so mellow. And I kind of like didn't know what to say to him. And I was like, I perform this kind of music all the time. And this is I've never passed out. So I don't think that was it. And he kind of looked at me and was like, yeah, no, I think it was. I think you just like zoned out and that like knocked you out.
I'm so glad that you clarified that it was a dude, because like just the idea of a dude mansplaining to you that you bored yourself to sleep with your own performance is just like, it's perfect. That is perfect in like the worst way, but it's just like,
right. And I didn't know him. I don't think I've ever, to my knowledge, I've never run into him in another show or anything like that. I'm just like, okay.
The oblivion of not realizing how much of a, not even backhanded like compliment. That was just like a straight up like, just kind of like a not a great. What's the point? What was his goal
Right.
of saying that? You know,
I know.
like,
And after I like
I got a real
passed
good
out, I
zinger.
mean, like literally passed
Right?
out on
Yeah,
the floor
like you don't
to be
need
like,
that on top of
and
it.
then like after I was like, at first I was kind of like, is this guy joking? And so I kind of like treated it nicely, at first, but then to be like, no, I don't think you're right. I think
No, yeah, I'm wow.
yeah,
The audacity of masculine oblivion.
yeah.
I feel like, yeah, to kind of continue that, what you just said. So I sometimes there will be some suggesting or things you could maybe do.
Have you tried like smiling
I would,
more?
that was really great. Have you ever done this thing that doesn't make sense to your set? And you'll be like, I'm not great at responding to that. I'd be like, thanks. And then, because that's sort of a different, it's just got a different feel than somebody like wanting to talk about the process,
Totally.
more like that was, whatever that was great. But have you tried, this thing I think you should do?
Like feeling like the performance is an opportunity for like you're doing it for criticism, like you're
Right.
looking for constructive criticism rather than trying to express yourself. Yeah,
it's always from people who don't like do the thing that you're doing. I feel like too is just like it's almost like non-comedians trying to write tags for comedians jokes or something. It's kind of like somebody said something like so ridiculous to me the other day. Have you thought about like maybe like trying to put getting your music on like a label or something? Yeah, that had occurred to me. Why don't you just do that? All right, I'll just do that. It's just like that kind of thing. It's just like,
yeah, I mean, sometimes that comes from a really like lovely place of people really wanting to be like you did something that really interests them, and so they want to talk about it further. But sometimes I'm not sure, but I don't know. There's like there's like a way that there's just a vibe sometimes that you'll get. It's like, because I want to talk about process all the time, every day, like 24 hours a day.
Same here. Yeah,
I love doing that.
Yeah.
It's one of the things. And, so, but sometimes you'll catch a little bit of a vibe, and you're like, I think you want to tell me that things, and that's cool. I'm glad you know things. That's great.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to shut anybody down. Also, that somebody who's like just trying to connect. And because I think connecting like around music can be hard for some, for some folks, because like I think there can be some shyness and some, folks not feeling like they, really have a place to talk. And
right, they want to let you know that they're on the level to have this conversation that they really want to have with you. And and I feel like that can come across sometimes as a little like passive aggressive or a little like, hey, like I think a lot of like people, they don't want, especially if you're just on stage, right? You're the center of attention. You're, for all intents and purposes, the reason everyone's there. They don't want to come up, like and kiss the ring so much, they like, and that's weird because that's all in their head. Maybe the person they're going up to is like a total rock star in their own head and is kind of that person. But, I feel like more often than not, especially with the type of music that we make and the places we play that, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of rock star going on. But I do feel like sometimes people, they don't want to like it. I think it's an unconscious like power dynamic thing that they don't want to like relinquish, like just because you're the performer right now, that doesn't mean that you're higher than me. And I think it's all this weird insecurity because musicians, some of us are a little insecure.
And
I think that I mean, just kind of like being like, thanks. And like, it can, I don't know. I'm always down to talk with pretty much anybody about like process. If we're really talking about, process, and there's genuine want for connection there, even if it's a little rocky at first,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think you
Yeah.
can like, you can suss out pretty quickly, like somebody's intention. Like,
Mhm.
did they just really enjoy what they just, experienced your performance? Did they really enjoy that? And do they just want to find any reason to connect? I walked up to the singer of some punk band that I was super into at Warped Tour when I was in like my early 20s. And I just wanted to talk to him, but I didn't know what to talk to him about, but I just wanted to talk to him. And so I was like, hey, I'm a big fan. And he wanted nothing to do with me. And very short answers. And I couldn't think of anything. And I had just remembered that he was like featured on another band's song or something. I'm like, hey, I really liked that. Like, are they cool? He's like, what, like, are they cool? Like, he was just like, what the fuck are you trying to ask me? And I was like, all right, see you later. But I felt like, I was like, just felt like such an idiot because I was trying to force the connection, and so I've been on both sides of it for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna just add that also, it's a little bit difficult navigating the experience when, like and I'm like Meg, I love, like come up and ask me about my gear. I mean, like anytime I'm performing with the Strega, and people are like, "What's that?" Let me give you the pitch on the Strega.
You don't know what you just asked me.
The whole thing. But sometimes some of the people are coming up, and it depends on how good they are at navigating it, but sometimes they're really just coming up to pitch themselves, so they're coming up to kind of not necessarily make a connection, but be more like a, hey, this is what I do, which is cool. But then they go, you can tell that it's even further, they're kind of like,
you should check it out, here's my
right, you
YouTube
should
link.
check it out, or like, hey, if you got a bill, can you put me on it sometime? Like sometimes you get that question, like even by like 30 seconds after meeting them and that sort of thing. And those are always tricky to navigate. And I don't know how you get around it, because that is, definitely somebody. I've been in the position where I wasn't someone who, I was somebody who was making music, but I wasn't playing out a lot. And getting to go ahead and play out and do things, involves going to shows and meeting people. I think for me, it was a little bit easier navigating that because I was genuinely interested in the people. I wanted to talk about their gear. I wasn't like going to try and hit them up, for a show, or pitch my album or anything. I didn't have an album, or anything like that. I like really just wanted to get to know them and find out more about their gear because they sounded cool. So in that respect, maybe it was like easier for me to relate to the people who were performing on stage because I was genuinely interested in them. But it's a hard thing to navigate because there are some really nice people that like are trying to do that, and they're just actively trying to get shows or get people to listen to what they're doing because it's their first time stepping out of doing it just at their house, or stepping out, and trying to play live with it and that sort of thing. But and I don't know, I realized I've talked myself now into a circle, talking about like how at first like that's hard to navigate, but also feeling, a lot of like, we were all in that position at one time.
I think
we were all in that.
You hit on something that I just like was talking to somebody else about the other day, and it's and I've been on both sides of this because I was the thirsty, hungry, like really I was never super self-promoty. I was more of like, I want to like get in part of this scene because I really just wanted to. It's been the community aspect has kind of like been my major driving force, but I definitely did want to make friends with the people who were doing the stuff that I also wanted to do. And maybe was a little like overzealous with it, but like, I think, to anyone out there listening who's like trying to get into anything like this or trying to break into a scene, is like the way that Kim, you just described how you did it, because it was a natural, because you were genuinely interested. So like, I think like just 2 words to anyone out there listening, just be cool. Just be cool. Don't try to rush anything,
Yeah. And not only that, but like that comes from like this really false narrative. I think we've all sort of that folks, especially in the music, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of everywhere, is that there's not enough for everybody. You know, it's
Totally.
like
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
mindset, and that there's not enough room at the table for everybody. And they're, you know, get bigger tables. You know?
Right. Yeah. Make
It's a
bigger
weird
tables.
poverty mentality. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like there's room, you know, there's room for everybody, and coming at it with like a, I mean, but that's kind of hardwired into like so many things that we do. And but I think that some of it could come from that. It'd be like, you know, well, there's only so many people who can make music, and
Right.
I want to be one of them. And it's like, you already are, you know, so like come at it with the confidence that you are a music creator.
Totally.
You know, you're already a creator, you know, you're already an artist. You don't have to worry about being called that. You already are. You know, you make music, you're a musician. You know?
Yeah. And I think these people that you like approach like this, maybe, you know, even if it's not as like dirty sounding as, you know, just trying to like get in on what they have, or like, you know, like get attached to them. But like, I will say this just from my own experience, knowing people who are, you know, world, you know, who are known worldwide, who are like, you know, who we would look at as like, okay, yeah, they are like rock stars or whatever. You know, to people who are just like really well known in scenes, or, you know, like I've met a lot of people who, before, you know, I had all the experiences that I've had, and going through this scene and multiple scenes, like these people that maybe like you look up to when you're first coming in and trying to like advance your career or whatever, like they cannot give you what you think they can give you as far as like for your career. Like that is, yeah, there's some good big breaks or anything, but like, you know, it's not up to them. They really don't have like this power that you think that they do to like elevate your, you know, unless there's some huge like review writer or label runner or something that is specifically, you know, but I don't know. It's just like, I feel like there's this tendency for really thirsty creators to put people on pedestals and kind of think like, okay, well, if I become friends with them, then I'll definitely be able to like get a record deal or something, you know? And it's like, you can't look at personal relationships like that. And it also just doesn't work that way. And I wish I would have been told that much earlier or something, but I don't know.
Yeah. And the thing that, and you know, both where this conversation has gone, and kind of like where this part of this conversation started, is kind of like bookended by the fact of like, eventually we all get around to, you have to learn how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
totally.
you know, because and so the people that you might think that have power don't exactly have all the power that they think. So that's one aspect of it. The feeling that you have to be necessarily invited. Like it's good to know, you know, like I'm thinking of people like starting to book their own shows. Like, you know, it is wonderful to be invited on by somebody, but there's also DIY places in most areas, in most towns and that sort of thing, who are open to, if you're a friendly person, if you're a decent person and not, you know, honestly, if you're not an asshole, then they're open to having you there, whether you're a no name or not.
Well, totally.
And just getting you and your friends together on a bill and starting to do that. If you know, and all of us have to do, you know, like there's a point at that. I don't know of anybody, and, you know, maybe I'm speaking in broad brushes, but, you know, I don't know of anybody who's even, you know, on kind of like bigger scales, you know, with their careers and things like that, that didn't start off, you know, like booking their own shows or getting together with their friends and making music. You know, we all kind of have to do it. So, and that goes to what you're talking about, is like the entryway is not necessarily getting to know this one star. If you want to know them because you like them and because you like what they do, you know, and you're coming from a genuine friendship place, then that's great. But if you're doing it for access, that access is really quite an illusion, you know, and you can have, and this is just to encourage people to have the confidence to go out and kind of like start doing it yourself, or figure out how to do it yourself, because everybody else always had to figure that out for themselves too.
Definitely. Well, this is, wow, I can't, this is like one of those Patreon bonuses that I like feel bad putting behind a paywall. I'm like, I feel like everyone, I feel like you guys, like, it started as kind of like a cheeky, funny question, but it really became like a really nice, insightful conversation. So thank you both so much for your time.
You went
all are
places.
awesome.
Thank you.
This was really fun. I love to talk about process, and this process was really special with Kim, and I'm glad we were able to kind of delve into it together.
Likewise. Yeah. I mean, just what, ever since I was a kid, when I got into a piece of art, especially a piece of music, like I wanted to ask the artists, all the questions, and now I get to do that. So I'm really I've got a bunch of podcasts booked, and I'm always excited for different reasons to talk to different people. But I was particularly excited about this one because I love your record so much. So yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Right on. I'm going to stop. All right, that's our show. Thank you so much to Meg and Kim for coming on. Don't forget to go check out their new album, link in the show description. Also, thank you to Patchworks, Novation, 4MS, and Bastel. I'm loving this Aikido. Go check it out. Don't forget that I am going to be making the Patreon post towards the end of this week. I'm not going to tell you exactly when. So if you want to be in on possibly getting a module, some patch cables, cassettes, stickers, or all of the above, please head over to patreon.com/Podular Modcast and sign up. And finally, thank you for listening to Podular Modcast. If you are not subscribed on YouTube, please click the old subscribe button there, and that would just warm my heart. This week's secret word is dreadful. Until next week.